So that sort of ends our formal debate. I think, John, you probably have a few sort of scripted comments or outline comments. And then, is it okay if they ask questions as you're going along?
Yeah, feel free to cut me off and you guys can interject whenever you want to. So
tell us what we need to know, what every person needs to know about what's really going on in Colorado. Not that we're putting a lot of weight on you there, a lot of pressure.
Yeah, no, a lot of weight on my shoulders here. Well, the first thing you guys probably want to know is like, what can you do when you come to Colorado? And I'm sure a lot of you guys have looked at the laws and everything now, but pretty much if you're 21 and older, you can purchase recreational marijuana, depending on the county and the city. I'll get into how the law is actually set up because that's a little strange. You can't buy it in every city in Colorado legally. Certain cities have made it legal, certain it's still not allowed. But anyways, if you're a resident, you can have up to an ounce on you. And you can also have up to an ounce on you if you're a non-resident. However, when it comes to purchasing, you can only purchase, I think it's a quarter ounce if you're a non-resident. So a little strange there, but that's kind of how they regulate it as far as people that aren't from Colorado and aren't residents. And as far as like public use and stuff like that, it follows the same laws as alcohol. So you can't smoke a joint out in public, you will be cited. And I think in Denver, throughout 2014, when it was legal for a year, citations for that were up about 480%. There was about 688 of them, so they're definitely regulating it a lot more too. And let's see, as far as how the law is set up, so it's decriminalized in all of Colorado. However, take for example, where I lived in Colorado Springs in El Paso County. El Paso County made it legal for recreational marijuana. However, the city of Colorado Springs did not make it legal, so you could not purchase recreational marijuana there. However, in the city that is in the same county, Manitou Springs, you could purchase it and use it recreationally. So it's a little strange how it's set up there. I think they wanted to leave some of the more local governments some autonomy still. So that's how that goes. Let's see. As far as laws go with DUIs, they do have marijuana DUI laws in Colorado. If you have 5 nanograms per milliliter of blood of THC, then you're legally intoxicated and you can get a DUI. And they have cited those. I couldn't find the numbers on them, but I've heard of them being handed out. But it was, when they passed that, it was fiercely debated because first off, people metabolize THC differently. And people build up tolerances to marijuana differently too. So it's a little more, it's not as clear cut as alcohol. So it's tricky to say, you know, this is the amount. And they also have open container laws for marijuana in Colorado. And how they define it is like a broken seal. What else here? Some of the product is missing that you purchased, or if it smells like it in your vehicle. But anybody, or any of you guys, if you've ever used marijuana or had friends that have used it, you know, it's not quite like a beer can or something like that, or beer bottle. Like you keep it in like a Ziploc bag maybe, or like a prescription case. So that definition doesn't necessarily work. So it hasn't really been enforced a whole lot, just because it is so ambiguous, and even the police officers don't really know exactly what they're trying to enforce or how to do it. And another thing, as far as consumption in vehicles, Colorado said you can, if you privately rent out a vehicle, like you have a driver in a limo or something, you can smoke in the limo and that's okay. So there's a lot of people that rent out like party buses and stuff like that, party limos. And also if you have an RV, you can have it in like the living quarters in the back and be using it. So it's kind of like another weird law. And then on federal lands, you can't have it though. So once you cross into like a national park, you know, Rocky Mountain National Park, you're not allowed to have any cannabis at all in your vehicle or use it. So I guess you gotta like drop it off and put it in a locker or something, I don't know. But since that is crossing the border, as far as regulation goes federally, new laws come into play. And that's a big deal. The biggest deal right now in Colorado is the lawsuit that's been filed by Nebraska and Oklahoma at the Supreme Court level, saying that they're having to spend a lot of extra money to try to combat black market marijuana that's coming out of Colorado and crossing into their borders. So it's a pretty big deal right now, and it's kind of setting up the case for a federal showdown, essentially. Like, is this legal or is it not? And it's slowly building it up. So we don't know what's going to happen yet, but I know the Attorney Generals of Oregon and Washington have publicly stated that they joined the Colorado case. So they're on Colorado's side now and saying we support legalization. We're against, saying that it's not legal. Let's see what else here. I had a couple stats I wanted to tell you guys. The banking issue. The banking issue has been big because banks will not touch marijuana money because it's federally illegal and they're afraid they can have a lawsuit filed against them. So people, there's millions and millions of dollars in this market right now. So people are just handling it in all cash. They're running out like armored vehicles, guys that are heavily armed to transport this to secret locations and put it in a safe until they can, use it to buy something else or pay their taxes. There hasn't been like a huge increase in maybe like some kind of violence associated with attacking those cash deposits and stuff like that, which is good. I've found maybe like 1 or 2 stories in the Denver area related to that. So that's pretty good. But however, there's a guy that applied for a patent to open his own bank. It's called Fourth Quarter Credit Union. And the point of it is to service all the weed money essentially that's in Colorado. However, you have to apply to a federal institution to get that ability. It usually takes about a week, and they filed back in November, and there's been no response yet. Because essentially, if the federal, I think it's FDIC, comes back and says, okay, this is okay, you can do it. That's like a federal way to say, like, hey, it's okay to use marijuana. So they probably won't do anything until the court case comes back. Which even then, I'm not sure how that's going to turn out because that sets precedents for, weed legalization nationwide. And I guess one last thing I'll tell you guys, tax money that came in. A good thing for Coloradans, they actually underestimated the money we were going to get. I think it was somewhere around 14 million they thought we'd bring in 2014. And Colorado actually made about $74 million. So they had all this excess cash that they were debating if they should do like a tax refund to all Colorado residents. But when they thought about it, they're like, it's only going to be like, I think it was like between $10 and $50, depending on which city and county you lived in. So they're probably just going to use it on some kind of social structure, education, build a school or build roads or something like that. So that was kind of interesting though to read that article. But yeah, guys, that's about it. So if you guys have any questions you want to ask or curious about anything else in Colorado, feel free to ask now. I'll open the floor to you guys.
Any questions for John? I'll start it off. I'm over in the corner. Maybe you can see me, maybe you can't. But can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. You said that 5 nanograms was their cutoff. Any idea what it is back home in Michigan?
I have no idea.
One
okay.
nanogram. And you know why that is? Because that's the minimum they can measure reliably.
Okay.
And that's the that level of THC someone can have a day or two after they smoke a joint. Because that's a really low level. Nobody's stoned on that. But the cops will bust people if they have 1 nanogram, if they have a measurable amount, because it's still illegal here. Mm-hmm. And you get into the gray areas for the people who have the medical marijuana, because medical marijuana is in Michigan. So people will have like a medical marijuana card, and maybe they have 1 or 2 nanograms, and there's an argument about whether they should be impaired drivers or whether they're allowed to have it. And that's sort of a debated issue pretty much right now. Other questions for John? Eric?
So if the issue is that they can't collect, or the federal government is not sure that they want to insure money that was made on the sale of marijuana, do they then not collect federal income tax on an individual who's employed by a marijuana shop?
As far as what I'm understanding, they still collect the tax. Like
no problem collecting that money.
What's that?
They have no problem collecting income tax on someone that works for a marijuana shop, but they won't protect money that was made by the sale.
Yeah, exactly. Especially, I think it's more the banks don't want to take on that risk. even though it does go up to the federal level because they're the ones that would then impose like the criminalization or whatnot. But yeah, how it goes now is when it comes tax time, they just drop off bags of cash essentially to the Federal Reserve building that's in Denver. And it's a pretty known thing. I've seen a few pictures of guys bringing in there, like, when it first started, they were kind of risque with it. They just bring in garbage bags full of cash. Kind of stuff their noses at the system and how it was set up. I think it's improved a bit since then, but yeah, that's how it's moving along at present.
So what is the status of illegal weed? I mean, there's still a black market. Is it more expensive? It's less expensive probably? Is it lower quality? What's the sense?
Yeah, it's from what I understand, it's less expensive by quite a bit because you don't have to pay the extra nearly 30% tax that you have to pay on the recreational marijuana, and it's still readily available. A lot of people, a lot of my friends that use it, they'll still buy from black market just because they already had that connection, that network was already established. So even when it became legal, like it didn't really change a whole lot at all. What I've seen is like the recreational aspect is more for people that didn't have those networks before or were like kind of on the border, like I don't know, maybe I'll try it. And now they have that way to purchase the product and use it legally. But there's certainly a huge market still.
So because this previously didn't exist, there was never a legal market for marijuana, and the tax only applies to the amount of money made on the sale, is the price dropping considerably? Because if I was a business owner selling marijuana, the cost to grow is not that expensive. And if you're making essentially large margins on your sale, wouldn't you just want to undercut the black market because it still exists and try and bring in those customers? Like if the decision is just based on cost to go to the black market because you already have that connection, why not just undercut that price?
Yeah, that would be a smart business decision. And you have, like, when it first became legal in January, I mean, people were paying like $250 for like a really, bad product of weed. So it's gone down since then. Prices have dropped since that initial inflation. But it's still, they haven't undercut black market prices. Maybe it will in the next 2-3 years. Tough to say, I guess. It seems like it's stabilized though where it's at now.
Well, there is one difference though too. The black market doesn't have to pay the taxes. So a cost of your product and your whole operation is your tax.
Right, so you have a 30% difference.
There's a question further back.
What about like people who choose to grow their own marijuana? Like why would I go buy it from a dispensary when I can have a couple plants growing in my basement that supply me whatever I need for my personal use?
Yeah, there's a lot of people that have done that. I mean, you can have up to 6 plants as a resident, and 3 of them can be budding. So people have done that, but I mean, it comes back to like you have to actually know how to grow it, go through all that process.
But
so it's a little more complicated.
But my question, I guess, was the laws allow you to grow it then, so there's no law against growing your own.
Oh, yeah, you can grow up to 6 plants per person. So. Yep.
Question, do the 6 plants per person, does that have to be grown indoors also, or is it only the large operations that have to have the indoor warehouse growing setup?
I believe it's only the large operations have to. From what I've heard, a lot of people have like a growing situation set up in their basement, or because you can't really grow outside in Colorado weather. It's not quite as conducive as like California is. Temperature-wise, but yeah, a lot of people have self-grow operations going.
Other questions?
Is marijuana tourism very big?
Oh, it's huge. That's one of the big things that people are citing up in Denver as far as keeping it legal because it's bringing in so much money and people visiting here. There was a little spring break season just got done with, and there was kind of a huge hit to the Colorado system because there's a death associated with cannabis. And what happened was a 23-year-old kid came with his family from Oklahoma, from Tulsa, and he bought a bunch of candies with his cousin, and they took them, and he ended up actually shooting himself with a gun that his parents had brought for protection from Oklahoma. But resultantly, because he had 8 candies, and he was under the influence at the time, it was pinned to marijuana as the reason for his death. He did take about 500% the amount that you're supposed to take, as most people typically seem to do when they don't use the product a lot. But yeah, it was a pretty big deal here, especially since he was so young too.
So that's a big problem in terms of mostly the edibles, probably, but maybe not just the edibles, but people underestimate the amount that they need, or maybe for an edible they don't wait long enough until they take another dose, and they take another dose and they overdose from that.
Yeah, and I think the latter is the big deal. Like, people will take one and then 20, 30 minutes will go by and they won't feel anything, so they'll take a few more. And then, an hour later, everything's starting to really come into play, and a lot more potent and powerful than what they had expected.
So are there people that are arguing that there should be smaller unit dosing? Because my understanding is, you buy a brownie that looks like a pretty good-sized brownie, it's like 12 servings.
Yeah, and everything, like, they pass a law pretty quick that it has to be broken down on each edible, like what's in it, how much you're supposed to eat, and how you're supposed to go about doing it. So the label's clearly on there, but in the end, it's going to be the individual that purchases its decision how they're going to go about using it. You can only do so much.
I want to buy a big bag of chips and it says 10 servings, and I know that.
Exactly.
Other questions? Yeah.
What's the difference in quality between black market and the legal stuff?
Well, from what I've gathered, like, probably the legal stuff is a lot better quality. Like, I'm not sure how this goes about happening, just because I don't know too much about how they procure and how they grow and everything, but I've heard that's some of the most potent stuff you can get. And I guess I've heard Colorado has some of the more potent grades, just because since you can legally grow it here now and sell it and everything, a lot of producers just came out here and started setting up operations, and they were already, I guess, at the forefront of growing a strong product. So I guess that's the best answer I can give.
So is it like there are a bunch of kind of medium-sized operations, or is there just one big Walmart of legal pot? Are there mom and pop stores that still sell?
Yeah, there's no Walmart weed store that you can go to yet. There's just tons of little businesses, and they're usually pretty small stores. I mean, they're no larger than like a gas station, and they just have their grow out somewhere else, probably out in the country, side of Colorado, and they bring in the product and sell it from there.
So it's a bunch of independent operations in a sense. I mean, or are they all connected?
I'd say independent operations would be my guess. Guys that own, 2-3 acres and put a building on it and then service their own crop from there and then bring it to their shops.
Other questions?
So are there like restaurants that are starting to get into it at all, or is it more simply just like edibles and buying whatever you want there? Are they like kind of crafting it a different way?
I've heard a few, like Denver's had a few places, they call them like private clubs now, because legally you can't buy marijuana either to smoke or like an edible and then use it, in the establishment. However, they got around it by turning it into like a private place, essentially, like a club or something like that, and you buy a membership for one day. So you're a member of the club, and then you can do as you please in the place. So they have these private clubs where people go to smoke all the time. I don't know, there's bongs and stuff on the table, and you can buy food that's laced with some kind of THC or just normal food. Like, there's people that do pairings now, like, oh, if you're gonna try this strain of bud, like, you want to have this kind of meat, it's definitely, people are getting creative with it. It's pretty interesting to see.
Are there any marijuana-based drinks? I mean, there's all these edibles, and like everyone cooks it into different food items. But are there drinks?
Yeah, I've only heard of a couple places doing this, and it was teas what they did. It was just like some herbal tea, and then it had THC in with it. So they're like, drink this, and it tastes good, and you'll get the effects of marijuana too.
I had heard that there was at least one drink that was popular for New Year's Eve as an alternative to champagne, but didn't hear anything more about it. Another question? Other questions? Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground. I thank you for staying and listening to the debates and contributing to the debates, and also for contributing to the class, John.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, you guys, and thanks for presenting your debates to me. It was very interesting hearing you guys' perspectives and all the issues. So thanks a bunch.
Thank you very much, John. You didn't say anything your mom wouldn't want to hear.
Yeah.